Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the last panel of, actually not the last panel. Yeah, no, the last panel of Streaming Media Connect. I apologize, 2023. I'm Evan Shapiro. I'm your host, your MC, and I'm actually the moderator of this next panel, which is Premium to Freemium, Monetizing Top-End Content in 2023. A really good topic and a really timely topic, given everything that's happening in FAST and AVOD and SVOD with ads. Oh my. Once again, for this panel, we are giving away a $50 gift card from Amazon to the first person who can name both the name of the tune and the name of the band that was just playing as we were streaming into this session. In the chat, please. You'll see in the chat comments like guesses for these songs and the band. The first person who can be here, who is here at the end of this panel, who guessed both the song and the band correct, will get the Amazon gift card. In the chat, you'll see other links like the YouTube channel for Streaming Media Connect, where all of the videos, all of the panels from this week will be streaming sometime next week. Look for them there. You'll also see links to bios and profiles for all of the panelists and myself, I guess. Maybe Steve will grant me a link in there. Please keep your chat limited to that and put your questions, which I will turn to at the end in the Q&A section of this Zoom. I'll look for the questions there at the end. And if there are cues there, I will get the A's from the panelists for you. But let's put the cues in the Q&A section. Once again, all of the panels and all the videos from all week from Streaming Media Connect will be on their YouTube page next week. So with that, we've got a really great panel of experts in the streaming video ecosystem. I'd like to bring them all to the stage to have this conversation. From Hub Entertainment Research, John Giegengack. From Erickson Strategy and Insights, Paul Erickson. From Warner Brothers Discovery, Dan Trotta. From Roku, Jen Vaux, and from Conde Nast Entertainment, Jen Jones. Hello, everybody.
Hey.
Hey there.
Are all your mics on? Good. So I like to start almost all the panels I moderate with a simple question, given the kind of weird movement in our industry, and basically ask you all at this moment in time, what the fuck do you do? John Giegengack. You run and founded Hub Entertainment Research. What do you do?
That's pretty much it. I started the company 10 years ago, and it's a consumer research company. We focus on the entertainment industry, and most of our work is in video. And we do about 50,000 consumer surveys a year to figure out how people find, choose, and consume, and pay for or don't pay for entertainment content.
And I told you I was going to tell you to popcorn, but I'm going to do it myself. Paul,
Okay.
same question. What the heck do you do?
Yes, so I'm founder and principal of Erickson Strategy and Insights, of course, and it's essentially an industry analysis, strategy, and board advisory consultancy serving media, entertainment, and consumer electronics. And I'm a former, research director for entertainment at Parks Associates, and I've covered M&E tech and the CE devices that go along with it across Parks, Omdia, IHS Market, MPD Display Search, and multiple firms over the years. And especially over the last 5 years, have really concentrated on streaming services. So I'm a gun for hire consultant these days.
Cool. Same. Jen Vaux from Roku. What the heck do you do? You have a huge mandate now.
Thanks. I oversee for licensed content, content acquisition strategy, programming and scheduling for VOD and FAST on the Roku channel.
Very cool. And Jen Jones?
Yeah, so I'm head of business affairs for Conde Nast, which means I oversee the deal-making teams that make all of our 26 different titles in 11 owned and operated markets, plus all of our digital videos, 5,000 a year, plus TV and film, plus podcasting. Plus we do business development, which means monetizing our content with third parties like Roku, who we love. And also I work on content strategy for Conde.
Awesome. Very cool. And last, but certainly not least, Dan.
Hey, I'm a product manager, over at WBD, working primarily on the Max with Ads product. And before that, I did time at Pluto TV and the History Channel. So I've crossed over a lot of different forms of the media industry.
Yeah, I'm going to double click, Dan. Product manager. What does product manager mean?
Great question. It's a lot like saying you work in
I
business.
thought so.
It means nothing until you find out more about what the person's actually doing. So for me, my job is to make sure that the ad features that we create play nicely with the engagement features that are used across all 3 tiers of Max. So it's a two-way street. When the product team is creating a feature that lives on all 3 tiers, does it play nice with the ad features? When we're creating an ad feature on Max with ads, does it interfere with engagement? And I sit between that.
Basically maximizing the length of stay for consumer as they're using the product and the revenue that against their eyeballs without disturbing the product.
Exactly.
Okay, that's a very specific definition of product management. And you know, to a certain extent, what you're looking for is with the content, the array of content that Max has across its entire platform. What do the consumers want? At what price? With what level of advertising? Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
So, John, you have access to a lot of data. You ask consumers kind of annoyingly regularly what they want, and specifically in these areas across paid and free and back again. What do they want? What from, you know, looking back over the last 2 years of your surveys, and you do them really regularly, what do you think the consumer is saying to us right now?
I think across the board, we're finding that people are using more entertainment sources of all kinds, but video specifically. It peaked last year at a little more than 7 sources per person. It went down a little bit for the first time this year to a little bit more than 6, but that's still the second highest number we've ever seen. So people are availing themselves of all of these different options that are out there. They're kind of creating their own bundles. There's stacks of video services, some of them that do really similar things. And I guess if we were going to, you know, how do they feel about it? They're really excited about the variety of options that they have. They're really excited about the amount and the quality of content that's available. But the congestion, the amount of stuff they're trying to use in the same 24-hour day creates this environment where they have 2 problems, and they're, you know, I call them first world problems, but they're people being who they are. They're very important to them.
Yeah.
One is complexity. So just the task of trying to use all of these platforms that don't necessarily exist within one bundle yet.
Wall garden, wall garden to wall garden.
Yep. And then pretty closely associated with that is this idea of value. So people are really willing to spend on TV, and they're a lot more willing to spend on TV than they are some other things. But as these stacks get bigger, they are less willing to sort of take a flyer and try out a new paid platform just for the heck of it to see what it's like. And they're thinking a lot harder about, am I getting enough value out of this, or enough utility for what I'm paying? And that's, you know, I hasten to point out that that's different than how much something costs. There are things that cost more than others that people still think that they're more valuable because they have better utility. But I think it does create that they're looking with a lot keener eye at, am I getting enough use out of this platform to be worth it? And then if they're not, they're more likely to drop it and take that money and transfer it to something different.
Yeah, I saw a study of yours. In fact, I think we shared a stage talking about this study at one point where, you know, under 35 consumers have something like 16 services, free and paid, that they use on a regular basis. Over 35, they have 11. But in both cases, out of all the must-have media they have, only half of that 16 is considered must-have, which means actually less than half is considered must-have, which means the other more than half is at risk on an ongoing basis.
On the bubble.
Paul, Paul, when you look out across the data you've seen, and when you have conversations with the clients that you have, what have you seen that effectively moves you from kind of nice to have to must have? Are you seeing different platforms or different programmers or different publishers utilize content differently, or utilize packaging differently to basically move their services from the kind of nice to have but disposable to that must have column?
That's a magic question for a lot of services. I think, you know, you have you know, what they can do within their own content portfolio, right? Which is to get better at personalization, making sure that they're super serving the interests that they know their you know, viewer has. But beyond that, I think, you know, also understanding, is there a possibility for us to ally, to be part of a bundle, to make a bundle a must-have, right? To see strength in that collaboration, because it's getting more difficult to keep people within a single service, right? And it's an ongoing issue with OTT in that, you know, it's it's a bit unfair to compare it to traditional pay TV because that dynamic of locking people in, it will never be the same as it is with traditional
For the
pay TV.
large bundle, and then within that bundle
Right.
to the triple play itself too.
Yeah, and this, contract and so on. And so it's always going to be easier to leave an OTT service, right? That just goes with it. So I think that, going forward, we see certain services that are very niche doing well also. So we know that people are very interested in certain niches, and they're often willing to leave a service if that show they like is not there, right? So you get strength in collaboration where maybe if you are challenged to, you've done the most you can do personalization wise, you have figured out to really engage your particular viewership, then the next extension beyond that sometimes is to find out, okay, so what can we do from a packaging perspective? What can we do from other companies within our own corporate portfolio to where the collective is the most effective lock-in? So I think we're going to see a lot of evolution towards exploring these bundles and collaborations as a way of extending the power of what you can do within your own content portfolio and offering.
And Jen Vaux from Roku, you guys, kind of to a certain extent have your own bundle on the Roku channel itself. It's a lot of different content from a lot of different sources, and you do a lot through acquisitions and rev shares and things like that. But then you're also making your own original content and doing some exclusive licensing as well around things like the Weird Al Yankovic, which is a great film, and other products that you're doing. Is there a different What's the overall strategy that's different from a premium content standpoint for free than it might be from a paid ecosystem? Is there a major difference that you take, an approach that you take or strategy that you take versus what a Netflix or a Hulu who has a paid version with ads might do?
Well, I think that the challenge that you have in AVOD is you only get paid on what people watch. Right. So we license, and our strategy is around that ad-supported model. And as a result, we're lucky because we're Roku, we have that one-to-one relationship with the viewers. So we can be laser precise with what we buy based on what we see pop on the platform. We have an ML, or machine learning algorithm, that drives people a personalized view of the Roku channel, but we also have it in VOD and FAST, and we program the Roku originals in both places. So we try to meet the consumer where they want to be, depending on the viewing experience they want to have or the type of content they want to have. And then again, we use the data to source the content on AVOD economics.
VOD is a relatively kind of newish component to what you guys have been doing from the beginning. It's expanding there versus where you guys started. Do you see that as a kind of co-equal with the linear experience on FAST? Do you see AVOD and FAST kind of working in tandem together across the two experiences?
Yeah, we definitely do. And in fact, I think David Eilenberg and his team have incorporated that philosophy in some of the Roku originals that we do. So you have, you can watch Martha Stewart in the library, but then go and watch a Roku original, which is Martha Cooks or Martha Gardens, and then go and lean back and watch more Martha in the Martha Fast channel, just as an example. And we do the same thing with the Great American Baking Show. So we're trying to kind of leverage all those touch points, again, how a consumer wants to interact with the content and the brand that they've decided to hang out with for in that day.
And then to a certain extent, being able to program for both those arenas in kind of, playlist version in the VOD, and then on the linear lean back fashion on the Roku channel, it lengthens the stay. I mean, you don't necessarily have the churn in the same way that the paid services do, but you have churn of kind of like, I'm going somewhere else. So you give them power to run their own experience, and it keeps them around for a longer period of time. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and just to understand the user pathing in general, what do they watch next, and always trying to understand that construct.
Dan, I mean, Max in the change from HBO Max to Max, seems to be leaning more into the lesser price ad supported end of the business as a way to open up the doors to more users, but also extend and grow the ARPU, the average revenue per user that are on the platform. But you don't have a free version. Or at least I don't know if you can talk about CNN Max, which is lit up my eyes and ears this morning. But is adding CNN a kind of new, different live version of that big global product to the service, a way of keeping your consumers at home before they want to leave the farm?
Yeah, I'm really happy that announcement came out this morning, because now I could talk about it a bit.
Right.
And it goes to what John and Paul were saying earlier, which is essentially, how do you be one of those top 8, maybe 6 services a user wants to subscribe to? CNN Max will be gated behind the paywall, so you will have to be a Max subscriber to access it, but it lets us hit new day parts, essentially. Like HBO, you're coming for prime time on Sunday, but are you coming back Monday morning, Monday evening to watch?
Daytime
CNN
programming
Max allows us, to sort of broaden out what we can be to users. I think listening to Jen talk a minute ago, I started thinking about how a subscription AVOD and SVOD play together when you're creating content. And there's an interesting conundrum where they want to do the same thing, but maybe slightly differently, because when Jen's launching Weird Al, Roku wants as many viewing hours as possible so that it can be monetized, and that's how you get your ARPU. On something like Max, it has to be an acquisition driver or a retention driver, either getting people in the door or convincing them to stay for another month. And then when you add the AVOD tier, now you're talking about how do you monetize it. So ultimately, does Netflix and Disney and all these other premium SVOD services having an AVOD tier impact the way that they greenlight and renew content, is something that I have my eye on big time.
So you're letting the data drive, a lot of the decisions, or at least the consumer behavior, get more involved at an earlier stage to understand how the programming decisions are made, which, I mean, owning your own platform allows you to do that. You're there, you have the access to your own first party data. And in fact, the Nielsen announcement that they're going to be covering, Amazon's first party data from their platform for live stream Thursday night football games all fall. And there was a major difference in measurement between Amazon's reading and Nielsen's reading last season. That's a good indication that for things like the NBA, for you guys, or CNN, on Max, you'll be able to maybe get a more accurate read of the audiences themselves. I do, though, I mean, in the FAST ecosystem, Jen Jones, your video is almost exclusively on social and on FAST now, right?
Yep.
And so in a world where a lot of FAST channels or a lot of FAST platforms are sharing the same content, you can find Great British Baking Show or America's Test Kitchen, or a lot of these shows in various different places. Is the show, are we entering an area where the show matters more than the brand? And if not, where does the place that, where do big brands matter in this emerging, very fragmented CTV viewing experience?
Yeah, well, unsurprisingly, I think brands matter a lot, right? And I think shows, when they are big enough, become their own brand, right? You can imagine that the Great British Baking Show, the Great American Baking Show is its own brand at this point, right? And these shows can become their own ecosystems, where you can also, even when they're non-media, they sell products. They're just giant franchises that can cross media, right? But I think in that world where it's so hard to create these giant tentpole shows, and it costs so much money, trying so many different ways to get to one hit, which used to be the broadcast model, right? That then in that world, brands matter tremendously, because it is the single most competitive entertainment environment in the history of the world. And consumers have so many different options of things to watch, that having a brand that resonates with consumers, where they understand that it means quality, where they understand what they're about to watch. Architectural Digest, you know what you're about to watch about architecture and design and home. Bon Appetit, you know you're about to watch food. Having that brand that cuts through the noise, I think, is hugely important. And I think it's been shown by the type of audiences that we get, even on social, we do primarily on social media. We do a lot with YouTube. We have our content in many places around, but it's still highly received and highly watched because the brands signal to consumers, come watch this, and you know what you're getting, and you know it's going to be good. So I think it definitely has a place, a big place. And I think the challenge that kind of we all on this phone call have is, how are we thinking about transitioning that into monetization and into how we interact with consumers on the day-to-day?
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. John, you actually, this gets into a larger question that I'm fascinated around bundles and bundles of services, because Paul said, the television bundle falling apart, the cable pay TV bundle falling apart hasn't really been necessarily replaced. It has. Amazon has done a really nice job of that. Amazon is probably the most trusted bundler in people's lives at this point. Free delivery, audio, video, gaming, music, which is also audio, and all this other kind of stuff. You actually did a piece of research where you asked consumers which brand they would trust to give them a bundle. I think Roku is one of those. I don't know that Jen necessarily sees Roku as a bundler per se, but I think the consumers very much see Roku as their portal to all of their CTV entertainment. So a de facto bundler there. You asked consumers, what brands they would trust to bring them different types of bundles. Am I getting that study correct?
Yep. Yeah, we had them build their own bundle, and we had them build like a bundle of 3 or 5 or 7, and we included, I think it was 22 different things you could bundle, and some of them were the obvious ones like internet service and live TV network bundle, and then some of them were a little bit more on the cutting edge or bleeding edge, like a game streaming subscription, and then some were things that don't even exist yet, so that you could. Well, I guess this one does exist in the UK, but like you could subscribe and get a new smart TV every 2 years, the way you get a new cell phone, subscribe and get a new current gen game console every 2 years, the way you would lease like your router from the cable company. And so we found some really interesting things, more than we would have time to talk about right now, but just in terms of the things that people bundle together.
Pick your top one. Yeah, right.
And how they bundle things together are different from the things that they use. So for instance, in that there was about 20% of people that built this gaming bundle, and they built it out of high-speed internet, the gaming subscription, and the game console subscription. None of the people that built that bundle chose cable TV as part of the bundle, but about half of them had cable TV. So there's this kind of dichotomy between things that they use and things that they think would sort of make an intuitive bundle. And then to your point, we also asked them which companies would do a good job of offering this bundle, and some of them were the obvious ones like Verizon or Comcast or Microsoft, but we also put in some like Roku, like the New York Times, like Activision, and just to see which ones would pop. And there's people have impressions of these brands, and they assume some of them would be good at doing things that they don't even do yet. So there's a lot of I think there's a lot of opportunity for companies, either the bundlers or the bundlees, to get in front of more customers, to get subscribers they wouldn't have gotten otherwise, and to have those subscribers be a lot more sticky than they would be with just a standalone platform. Because across all of our research, it's really clear that services that are part of a bundle are much less likely. They're more likely to fall into that must-have category. They're least likely to be things that people sort of think about canceling every year, because they're just one little part of a bigger transaction, and there's a lot more inertia to have it stay with you.
Yeah, and I think to a certain extent, go ahead, Paul, jump in.
Yeah, I had something to add, and
you don't have to raise your hand. This is not class. You don't have to be polite.
John and Jen from Roku, maybe you can chip in with your thoughts on this. I think to add on to what John said, what I've seen and feedback I've gotten, and certainly I think John and Jen, you've both seen this from your angles as well, that it's not just the retention value of bundles. Like, we see a common consumer sentiment that they're overwhelmed, right? Like a huge, pick your phrase, overload of
paradox of choice, yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And whether that's the number of services that they have on offer, whether it's the amount of content that they have on offer. So there is a certain appeal there, a vector, where it's not just, having a mix of things that's appealing. It's the simplicity, right? giving them the value of that aggregated simplicity, reducing their cognitive workload for managing all these different subscriptions and billing relationships. And what different services are they going to choose? Well, you offer them this funnel, right? They can choose all these things from one place. So I think that there's a common thread of simplicity, and that in itself is an appeal to the consumer. John and Jen, I don't know if you guys are seeing this also from your respective angles. So maybe you can.
Well, I think that's one of the unique selling propositions of Roku is its simplicity. I think consumers like it because it's just
ease of use.
I turn it on and there I am, right? And so as the home of the apps for those consumers, you have the benefit of when they want premium content, that they subscribe to, you give it to them. And when they churn out of that, because they're done with that one show, they come to your arena to watch for free. And that seems to be the overall strategy that's benefiting you you have to see length of stays going up. I know you can't go into too much detail, but usage for you is you're in the record number of homes now that continues to grow. Your usage seems to be continuing to grow, not necessarily without limit, but still up and to the right. And it's the idea that you're basically offering the full range of the hierarchy of feeds for your consumers. No?
Yeah, Roku is a platform, and so I think the tenets are ease of use and value. So making sure that we're just a good value proposition to the consumers, and also choice, and having the content that you want to watch on the platform. So working with our app partners as well as content partners within the Roku channel. And we are in we have over 73 million active accounts now on a monthly basis. So people are coming back and they are engaged. In the Roku channel itself, we do have some what we call premium subscription partners where you can subscribe. And I know we look at working with our partners to provide the best either bundling or offer as possible to keep them in the ecosystem. And again, just trying to reduce friction to get people into content is a big one that a platform thinks about. And universal search is another key metric. It's like, how do you leverage all the Roku touch points, whether it's on the home screen menu or universal search, or working with our media and entertainment clients who buy those big ads that drive you right directly into content.
Yeah, no, I think the discoverability, and that's another thing that you seem to be constantly upgrading, is the discoverability on the platform, based on user behavior. Dan, we talked about this once on a call as we were preparing for this panel. Yes, we do prepare for these. The number of walled gardens, the number of apps. So you open your Roku, you open your iPhone, you open your Samsung, and there's only so much room for so many apps on that first screen. And regardless of how many apps there are, how many channels have ever been, when you look back through cable or now through apps, the unlimited number of them doesn't really matter at the end of the day, because the consumer tends to use about 5 to 7. Mm-hmm. And here we are, oftentimes, especially members of your cohort, your competitive set there, competing with themselves with their free product sitting right next to their pay product, or in some cases, like 4 or 5 different apps. Do you think we're going to see more maxing, more Discovery Plus and HBO Max, combining into one, now adding a CNN to it? Or do you, is that inevitable? And what do you think are some of the blockers of getting us from perhaps where we are in a cluttered paradox of choice, as Paul was saying, to one that has fewer walls between the gardens, a little bit simpler to navigate? Yeah,
I think the number one blocker, to nobody's surprise, is all the money that cable throws off. That's why companies don't jump into MSNBC or Fox News or CNN earlier and with 2 feet, because you can't start screwing up that relationship with the MVPDs. I think that's going to continue to be an issue. Even Max doesn't have 100% of what's on Discovery Plus, because there's still enough viewership and interest in the Discovery Plus service to warrant it being a standalone thing. I think, Evan, you also brought up while we were talking a couple of days ago, the idea of having a FAST and AVOD and SVOD, and kind of letting viewers move more fluidly between
Pluto
those.
And Paramount Plus as one ecosystem versus 2 competing apps, which is what they are right now.
Right. This idea that if you don't want what you just said before, your two apps competing against each other on somebody's phone. And I think that is a very scary proposition for me, because
what is the combined free and paid ecosystem in one?
the idea of removing the friction for users to pay you more or pay you less based on how much they want to use your app at the time, because you want to be able to count on somebody as a subscriber 6 months down the line when you're launching your next thing, in order to be able to invest in that next program, that next feature appropriately, and make those sort of projections. Meanwhile, as a consumer, that's what I would want, right? Like Hulu lets you pause your subscription for 12 weeks. If the thing that you're watching isn't on air, or you're coming for the specific thing, you could pause it for 12 weeks while it's off air, let it come back. That's an amazing feature. But at the same time, it brings up the question, like, do you lean into that sort of consumer behavior, or do you create even more barriers against it? And if I was betting, I would say it's the second one. People will eventually start creating more barriers to that behavior in order
between
to
the
get
free and paid.
Yeah, in order to get the predictability that lets you do good long-term planning.
Huh.
And
I mean,
what
I see it.
Jen, why don't you go ahead?
Oh, I was just going to say, I completely agree with the need for companies to have long-term planning. Having, I think that as a business affairs exec who often sits in the back rooms to do all the planning, I think that the amount of indecision in the marketplace right now is higher than it's ever been, and is causing kind of this throwing spaghetti at the wall approach to see what works unintentionally, right? The back rooms are trying to figure out I don't think anybody thinks they're throwing spaghetti at the wall, but they end up having to do that because they're consistently adapting, and everybody wants more certainty so that they can plan. But I would note that even if you have certainty, you can't always plan, right? Even if you know you have a certain amount of subscribers, you don't know that the show that you're going to make next is going to even hit, that they're going to like that show. And I actually think, Jen, your model, where you basically said, like, we have to be always on. Everybody has to be there. Like the Roku model, for Fast at least, is measured in terms of audience attention. So you have to have enough good stuff always, right? And then the streaming model is more like, come here once and stay. And so I think the indecision really does play a big part in the back rooms, but I also, on behalf of all business affairs and lawyers everywhere, the contracts also play a big part, right? Some of the content's just not available to be merged or moved over, or you're going to have to pay.
Or have ads run inside of it in the case of
Right.
Netflix.
That you just didn't get those AVOD rights. So it's not available for your new product. And in order to have it be available, it's going to be another 5 years, 10 years, or you're going to go back and pay more for it. And so I guess my only point is that the decisions, sometimes these big decisions that we all think are super strategic and determination of the future of the industry, are sometimes premised on like, oh, we didn't negotiate that because nobody told us to. Right. And so I think a lot of the backroom stuff is determining a lot of the strategy.
Well, and also you said to me as we prep for this, because every contract is really just a revision of the last contract.
Yeah.
Versus a whole new slate of like, where should we, like, if we could we start from a completely clean slate? Often contractually, no, you can't.
You can't. Well, and as you're doing it too, I mean, yes, Evan, we've talked about it. I firmly believe that most contracts and deals are done in a way, the easiest deal to make is to say it's exactly what you already agreed to. We just changed one thing. That's it. We just one tiny thing. That's all we changed. You agree to it, right? But the problem is that then you're turning everything into a version of something else. Mm-hmm. And this industry has evolved so that it's not simply a version of something else, right? When you think about broadcast or cable, you got one run and one rerun at a set time in one country. Streaming now is unlimited runs anytime you want in every country in the world. That's not a version of the other thing. It's it's so much different. And I think all the systems are trying to slowly, in order to get consensus, accommodate just small little things. And so we've ended up at this place where the friction is so high that there are clearly in the industry impasses that we're dealing with right now, right? And so I think on behalf of all backroom folks everywhere, we have to figure out a way to be a little bit braver to say, yes, it is a version, but it also is new. And how do we proactively think about accounting for the new?
Yeah. Paul, do
I
you
think
feel
that's
do you
exactly
feel
right.
like there's an appetite for pure new out there? I mean, that's the thing, is it does feel like, when I heard Bob Iger say, hey, the decline of the linear television business, the traditional linear pay television business, is faster than I thought. I'm like, really? How did you
Is there
miss
an
that?
appetite for new? I think that there is an appetite for new, right? But I think that at least right now in this current phase of increased scrutiny on finances, economic conditions being what they are, I think you're going to see a more measured approach to new, right? It's not unlimited content budgets to commission everything to scale anymore. It's really trying to see what is a good bet, right? When they commission new content, when they look at greenlighting a new series, and to some degree, and I don't know if my fellow panelists want to, agree or disagree with this. I don't know what that does for creative, right? I mean, does that mean, okay, we only see content spend being committed towards, these tried and true genres, right? Or we know that this is a bankable star and cast,
Right.
and the valuation is high enough in that content to where, okay, we're definitely going to commit. What does that do for taking a risk on something that truly is new, right? Something that's different. And so I can't answer that. But I would say that there's to cap it, there's going to be a more measured look at what you do in new compared to what's come before in streaming.
I want to pivot for a second there, or for actually pivot for the rest of the panel. First of all, I want to actually tell everybody who's watching, and I have no idea how many people are in there, but if you can put your questions in the Q&A section so that I can turn to them in a couple seconds or minutes and ask the panelists questions that you have for them individually or as a group. This is something that I'll throw out there to the whole group, because I know that John and Paul have done research around this topic, and I think this topic will touch pretty much all the publishers / platforms on the panel as well, which is the role of live and sports. I want to kind of bifurcate them into two different things. I think again, going back to CNN Max and understanding what a game changer I think personally that's going to be for your platform, and then sports as well. Because you're seeing YouTube. I think the day that NFL Sunday Ticket hits YouTube is going to be another paradigm shift along the same size that Thursday Night Football hitting Amazon last year. But I actually think the Messi deal that Apple made with Major League Soccer is a real game changer. When you look at what's happened now with the strike, we can't make middle-class writing jobs work necessarily as an economic thing because of these massive worldwide rights deals that are being done. A lot of the money is being moved into sports rights. How do you make them affordable? I think Apple cracked an interesting new perspective paradigm shift there about how to make these things work. But whether it's live daily news or ongoing sports, these things carry a tremendous price tag. And are they going to be the purview exclusively of the premium services? Warner Brothers Discovery has a basketball renegotiation with the NBA coming up. Major League Soccer is another good example, NFL, et cetera, et cetera. Or are we going to see kind of the sports leagues take back the rights and start their own competing services, like seems to be happening on the back end of the Diamond thing? I open that up to the field there, because I think the combination of live seems to be where the both ends of the spectrum want to go, both free for recurring utility eyeballs and paid for the premium religion that sports brings to the table, but also the daily user from a news product as well. So Dan, if you wanted to start that, given the fact that you just again announced an exciting new live product daily on your platform.
Yeah, I think I'm not sure we've said the word churn yet.
I brought it up a little there, but churn is now, yeah, right. That's I think the larger thing is, Jen's product doesn't necessarily have churn because it's not paid, but It does. People leave either way, and it is
I feel the
major
churn.
existential- Yeah, exactly. You know it when it happens, right? So, is live and recurring and utility kind of the churn cure? Is it the cure for churn?
I mean, I think so for sports in particular, because if you're a Inter Miami fan and you love Lionel Messi, that's going to be on for 30 plus weeks a year. You're going to need to be on Apple TV Plus.
What do you think? What effect do you think a live news product like that? Because there is no daily, I guess there's daily stuff that's on the Max thing. You're uploading new content on a regular basis, but this is a drumbeat of the same news broadcast, I believe, for 4 hours every day, right? Live, correct?
I don't know exactly the content in it. I am under the impression there will be a considerable live element to it. And I think that news is even a little bit more indirect. News is a retention tool in the sense that it becomes habitual. You're a habitual Max user. You're coming back 5 days a week to watch CNN Max. Sports is so very direct. There's an event each week that you need to subscribe to while the season's going on. And then there are things that are adjacent to sports. Like I'm very jealous of Peacock for WWE. I think that must be driving, those WWE viewers must be hugely valuable from a retention perspective to Peacock. And that's something that not a lot
They
of
spent $1.5 billion for it. I hope so.
Yeah. That's something not a lot of programs can emulate. And those are like just golden gooses.
I hear it's all fake though. Is that true?
What?
But I think what he, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I think ultimately the question is cost. Like, does Apple does this with MLS because they can get a lot of leverage with the MLS? Can they do the same thing with the NBA or NFL and shell out tons and tons of money for something where the NFL is not going to listen to whatever Apple says? I think that's a different question.
Good one. John, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say something that Daniel said, that it's a golden goose. Like I think that the reason sports are so important is that they're, out of all the kinds of content that's out there, they're not duplicable. They're unique. There's only one NFL. If you want to watch the NFL, you have to go where the NFL is. And even if we look at big, massive hits like Yellowstone, if you can't get the Yellowstone, there's other shows, there's other hour-long soap opera dramas that you could watch. Probably not as awesome as Yellowstone, but you could still watch some other shows if you wanted to.
Bonanza.
Yeah, exactly. But with sports, it's the only thing. And Iger talked about this in one of the earnings calls where he said they really need to focus on sort of unique, unduplicatable content that makes it
distinctive. Yeah.
Yeah, like in our research among so brands definitely do matter, especially brands like Conde Nast that sort of are equivalent to a certain type of content. Those matter a lot. But when we look at the brands of the big streaming platforms, we find that for the biggest ones, all that marketing spent during COVID did a really good job. Awareness is universal. But when you ask people,
what does the brand stand for?
How is it, how confident are you that you could describe to somebody else how this brand, Netflix or Max or Paramount Plus, are different from the other streaming platforms? Netflix does okay. But most of them, the understanding of the value proposition of the brand, to the extent there is one, is about half of what the awareness is. Even Apple, who we think about as being one of the companies that's the best at branding for anything, only about half the people who have heard of Apple TV Plus feel confident they could explain to somebody else why Apple TV Plus and not something different. And I think as soon as you have something big like a destination, and sports would be one of those, that gives people a reason to go to that platform instead of another one, where in the absence of that, if they're just looking at them on a level playing field, they might not know what distinguishes one from the other.
Yeah, I want to spin it a little bit on its head though, from a distinction standpoint. Jen Vaux, I want to ask you about, I mean, I don't know how much you dive into these numbers, but the news initiatives you guys have been taking, especially and particularly local news, which is a different kind of distinction. So it's kind of a vertical version of distinction. Those seem to be working really well. Is that just my reading of the tea leaves from Amagi and Samba and all these other areas, or are you seeing those local channels really fit into the lives of the consumers that use your product?
Yeah, I mean, you go back to it. I think, Dan, you mentioned this when you talk about stickiness. You put the consumer at the front of this, and it's about habit and what are their need states. And so the thing about news is informing. And so people come in for their hyper local event. And, we seem to have a lot of events going on across the United States these days. So people are getting their information. So we have relationships with the 4 major news organizations, and we have the majority of their local channels as well. And so we're looking to create not only offerings for content, but it's like meeting the people where they need to be for the information that they want to be. And then, to touch on what Jen said, brands are important. And Fox, who watch their news, whether it's ABC or Fox or CBS, they will go down that rabbit hole. And so making sure that we have that opportunity there. Same thing with sports right now. They're really leaning into fast and trying to figure out what is their fast branding or what is their branding in this fast environment to complement, say, the MLS of it all and Apple TV. So we have the MLS channel, the NFL channel, Roku Originals just commissioned NFL Draft. The Pick is In, which is premiering tomorrow.
Oh,
So
cool.
That's a doc series.
Yeah, and right before it. So get it in before your fantasy picks. We're just trying to see how we can super serve brands and elevate brands on our platform as well, whether it's working directly with the folks who have NFL ticket or with the NFL directly in their fast or their originals.
Yeah, again, I think that's why Roku kind of serves as that theoretical bundle in the lives of your consumers. You can get all of that through the prism of that one screen. Jen, you were going to say something, but I do want to also ask you. We've been talking a lot of late of like watching time slots move to CTV. Maybe not the same day parts, meaning they're not watching during the same hours, but the same mindsets, like news we were just talking about, daytime we mentioned, that feels like, especially for lifestyle brands like Conde Nast, that feels like an opportunity to take advantage of. No?
Oh yeah, I think it's absolutely an opportunity to take advantage of. I think actually that works perfectly with what I was going to jump in and say. I think, John, what you were saying was like consumers don't really know how to differentiate between the brands of different, like, Paramount versus Peacock versus, well, I would say, right, that makes total sense to me because those were never intended to be consumer facing brands with content in them. Those companies came about at a time where they were, backroom companies and meant for a diversified ecosystem where they're putting out content everywhere, literally until, the streaming wars came around. Did anybody, like any regular consumers know, like the WB made Friends and Universal made The Office? Probably. Hollywood, yes. Everybody else, probably not. And they only had to figure that out when they needed to figure out where to go. Those weren't consumer facing brands. I think the number of consumer facing brands, content brands in the world is very small. Many of them are owned by Disney. Marvel, Disney is a content brand. Star Wars, by the way, franchise made by Lucasfilm, primarily kind of is a brand, but and like Conde brands, obviously Vogue, Vanity Fair, The New Yorker, AD, Architectural Digest, Bon Appetit, GQ. Something is coming to your mind when I'm saying those things, right? So do you know what those content brands are? I think it is absolutely an opportunity for us to be thinking about how to be in the fast space in a bigger way. And how to bring our lifestyle brands to consumers the way they have been in the traditional ecosystem, which is as a part of your daily life in a morning show, in a cooking segment, in a cooking show, in a design show. I think that real content brands have a real opportunity there. News and sports, I also think, are content brands. Absolutely. Sports, obviously, everybody knows what you mean when you say NFL, right? I would, though, caution Evan, to your earlier question, when you're like, should they start their own streaming service? That's a totally different business than creating football games. So yikes, like if you're gonna do that, really think about that because it's a totally different model. And as I was sitting here prepping for this, I kept going back to in the kind of earlier times in television, the money was coming in because there were many different points of contact for any given channel or show. You were making something, you got a fee on it. When you sold it in the United States, you got a syndication fee, you got a DVD fee, you got, ex-US syndication. There were all these different points of contact. Walled Gardens pull that in. So your only monetization is subscribers get them, right? And that's scary. That's actually really scary. And Netflix probably didn't think about that because, hey, they weren't an original Hollywood player when they got in here. But that's what's happening now is we're actually narrowing the availability of monetization. And I feel like it's correcting itself. It's going back out to AVOD, right? So now it's subscribers and AVOD. And Roku, I think, is, you guys have hardware and ad supported and kind of getting other subscriptions. I think it's a diversified model, but for the NFL to think about that is a totally different business. But
Colin, and to jump on that, so Roku has devices. They are a publisher of sorts. They're making content, they're buying content, they have their own channel, and they have apps where they aggregate everybody else, all the other publishers in the ecosystem. That seems to become the model that is really making over the entire television ecosystem in particular, but the larger media ecosystem as well. Meaning it's not enough to only provide a channel. Paul, Amazon is a really good example. Google is going to be another really good example because they're the fastest growing operating system inside televisions. They don't have near the scale of a Roku, but they are, making a move in that vein. When you look at Apple and all the things they're building across their bundle of services across Apple One, but also they can give you an iPhone along with that suite of sports, news, television, audio, podcasts, and the such. Are we leaving an era where the channels are necessarily driving the bus the same way that they were in the last pay TV driven ecosystem? Or are we moving to an era where the new Comcasts, Roku and Amazon and Google and the such are going to really dictate the terms of engagement between publishers and their consumers?
I think you do see a lot of that the power shift happening there, like especially in the advertising universe, et cetera, where the people that control the platforms, right? They control the streaming platform, and to some degree, if they control the hardware too, like a Samsung, they get to control a lot of the monetization there, right? And they control access and they control your experience, right? What you get to subscribe to through that portal, right? That smart TV experience or that streaming device experience. So there is a bit of a gatekeeper role that's evolving with those platform owners, and where we ultimately end up, I don't know, but I think that the new reality is that they have to be dealt with, right? They're new power brokers going forward, where the person that controls that experience, even if they don't control the hardware, like a Google, right? And whether that's Google TV in the consumer universe or it's Android TV operator tier in the service provider universe, to some degree, your conduit there is Google to some extent, right? No matter what type of UX enhancements you layer on top of it, you're now within a Google and Android controlled universe. Same thing if you're dealing with Tizen and Samsung, or you're dealing with Fire TV across the various editions and Amazon. So I think they're part of the new reality that has to be considered because they are somewhat of a gatekeeper. And whether that's from the advertising perspective and you're dealing with measurement, right, from the Roku landscape, right, or from Vizio or Samsung, and whether that's from a service perspective, right, like you want to have prominent position within the Samsung UX, right, to have your row of selections appear prominently, you're going to have to pay for that. So there's a number of different dimensions there. I think we've just scratched the surface in terms of how you deal with these platform gatekeepers, but I do think that going forward, it's going to be content. I mean, content and services are always going to have a role, but I think also the conduit within which they are served to the consumer, that's also going to have a role.
And with the CTV now being the home screen of the home, that's a new set of deciders. We have some questions from the audience here. Beth Rosen, who's been with us all week. Thank you, Beth. Curious on freemium channels, when people just watch but don't subscribe, how does that affect or not affect your ad revenues or projections? What's the spread between watch without subscribe and those who watch for free? Are there any platforms right now that offer a pure free and then a paid with ads and then a paid? I don't think that there are. I think Peacock was the last one. And so what's fascinating though, when you look at, and I don't know, I don't have the ARPU of the folks on this call off the top of my head, so you're welcome for that. But when you look at the high end ARPU in SVOD, I believe the highest ARPU in premium SVOD is Hulu. And that's because a huge, almost 2/3 of their subscribers have ads. I think the highest ARPU in all of streaming may be YouTube. I'm not 100% certain of that, but they have a very high ARPU. They have a bunch of different products that are premium and paid and subscription. So I think when you look at Hulu's ARPU and you look at the sliding scale of their users, I think they understand that a mix of ads and paid really is crucial to driving up the average revenue per user. It seems like, Dan, that seems to be the strategy increasingly on Max, especially now with this move. Is that what your thought process is?
Yeah, and from the ARPU point of view, there's such a huge spread. You have people that will come once, I mean, from the Roku perspective, especially, come once and then not again. You have people who can generate multiples of the revenue you would get from a subscriber just from their viewing time alone. It's becoming a very interesting question in my day-to-day. How do you kind of stratify users by the ad ARPU they're able to generate and serve each of them differently? That's kind of a layer that we're peeling back and trying to dig into, because those users, they're paying the same monthly subscription, but their value is incredibly different. And clearly their engagement is incredibly different. So how do you serve essentially the highest ARPU and the lowest ARPU users? How do you best serve them
at the same time? Yeah. But it does seem to me, if I think I read this in your earnings call, and so I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I think the subscribers who pay and get ads, so pay a little less but get ads, seem to be a higher revenue per user for you than the pure paid ad folks. Is that a good assessment? Is that my correct reading of the circumstance?
It's a
Or
good
do you not
assessment.
feel comfortable?
I think it teeters in and out at the moment, but I think if you talk to me a year from now, it'll be a clear yes.
That'll be the case. Yeah. And Jen Vaux, in your mindset, do you see? I mean, you don't have paid users, but they are paid users because they buy your device at first, most of them anyway. Do you see a major difference in revenue per user for those who kind of use you for the free stuff and the paid stuff versus just the paid stuff, or versus just the free stuff? Or is that not a level of detail maybe perhaps that you've dug into yet?
Yeah, I'm focused on free at the moment.
Cool. And so your goal on an ongoing basis is to just keep them on your channel as long as you possibly can. Is there a strategy that you're employing these days that kind of really feels like it's working like gangbusters? A new programming strategy in particular that you think has really lengthened the loyalty for each user on an ongoing basis?
Nothing new. It's more continuing what we've always wanted to do, which was get the content that viewers wanted to watch in front of them. And again, low friction into getting into that content. So whether it's, live news or sports, complemented with, I call it collision viewing, content you're familiar with. And it's like, lean back. Oh, I recognize this. I'm going to go sit down and watch Cold Case. So just giving viewers what they want. I remember when I first started here 5.5 years ago, and we were looking at FAST, somebody said, oh, millennials will never watch FAST because I guess cable always, was on the older side of the viewer. But what we're seeing is millennials grow up and they have kids and families and jobs, and they want to either put their kid in front of Barney or just lean back and have a positive experience. And so Anthony Wood, who's our founder, his vision is that one day all streaming and all advertising would be streamed. And so just moving towards that direction and getting our streamers in front of great content, and hopefully being the tide that rises all boats.
In our research, the fast users are younger than viewers in general, and they're not stingy either. They actually spend just as much on paid platforms as non-fast users do. So this idea that I think people assumed at the beginning that maybe fast would be sort of this cheap workaround for people that didn't really care about TV that much, and it turns out it's much more a way for people that are maybe even more immersed in TV to sort of exercise their curiosity without having to take out their credit card again.
and also fill in the gaps between the churns.
Yep.
So consumers seem to, churn is now 25% across the entire, has gone up at 25%, around 6%, 7% now for the entire ecosystem. A lot of people sign up for a paid service, watch a show, binge, churn out, and they need a place to go in between as well. And increasingly with original programming, the FAST services are also providing exclusive and distinctive stuff as well. That is all the time we have. I could go on for another 2 hours with all of you all, but I think perhaps you'd leave. So I want to thank everybody who watched for sticking around. I need the winner of the song in the chat from Steve, so that I can announce that. But I will thank you all. There we go. So the song was the band was Velvet Underground and Nico. And the song was All Tomorrow's Parties. And our winner who stuck around is Matthew LeCount. Thank you very much. Thank you, panelists. This was a great conversation. Thank you, Streaming Media, for a great conference. Thank you all for hanging around all week with us. And all of the panels from today, yesterday, and the day before are all going to be on Streaming Media's YouTube channel next week. Steve is about to put that in the chat. Look for that link, which you can also search for it on the Google machine later. Again, thank you, panelists. This was awesome. Have a good rest of the week and a good weekend and a good rest of the summer. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Evan.
Thank you, Evan.
Thanks, guys.
Everybody.